So let's talk about how to not take things personal. In the last video, I talked about how to tame your ego, and now I'm going to give a short lesson on how to not take things personal. It's one of the hardest things that human beings struggle with is the ability to not take things personal. And one of the reasons why we struggle with that is because we haven't tamed our ego yet. At the core of how we take things is the ego, you know? Um, if you take things personal all the time, for whatever reason, but it just feels like you get insulted. Um, you may want to analyze that because perhaps the reason why that insults you has a lot more to do with your insecurities than it has to do with what you're sure of about yourself. And here is another thing also to consider. Individuals usually will project their expectations, project their thought patterns onto their reaction or interaction with you. So you're taking something personal from individuals that are not even really expressing an authentic or true um, uh, energy towards you. It's really stemming from their lack, from their limitations. So ask yourself, why are you taking that personal? One of the first things you have to do is kind of dissociate yourself even from your own self and understand that, you're a spirit encapsulated in a body. And I know that sounds so ethereal and what's the point? And this is not a religious or spiritual post at all. This is more of a psychological one. When we understand that there is a division of energies when it comes to our existence, there's the physical energy and there is the electric energy, because yes, there's electricity in our body through the neurological system or the nervous system. Well, scientifically we have those two energy forms. um, Potential energy from the neurological system allows for kinetic energy to exist in the body, for movement to happen. Well, if we want to take it to the spiritual route, then we could say it's a spirit and a body, right? So science actually proves something that religion or spiritualists or theologians have been trying to kind of explain forever. What does this have to do with taking things personal? We take things personal because we give too much value to our physical existence. We give too much value to our physical state. We give too much value to the physical things we own, the physical things that are in our grasp, instead of giving value to what matters, which is the character that we have, the person we are to other individuals, how we make people feel, and in turn, how that leads to whatever happens in their life. Also, how do we approach and how do we react with other individuals when we need something? Or just even if we don't need anything, how are we as people? Are we flexible with our feelings, with our thoughts, with our understanding? Um, and if the answer to that is no, I'm not as flexible as I would like to be, well, maybe it's time to start doing that. One of the first steps to harness the ability to take things a little less personal is to start being more flexible with your interactions and your understanding with other people. That means don't be so harsh. Don't be so quick to judge. You have to start almost exercising patterns of non-judgment, of realizing that when you are even saying judgmental things, to kind of cancel your own self out in terms of not saying that again, or recognizing that that's judgment and apologize for it if you're in an interaction with someone and it comes out as a judgment statement. Now, this may seem like it's unrelated with the act of not taking things personal, but the two are very connected because how you project yourself onto the world is going to also then come back at you when someone else projects themselves onto you. And then you're going to take things personal because you're going to assume it stems from judgment because that's what you do. It's stemming from judgment. But if you know wholeheartedly that you're not stemming from judgment or malicious intent or malicious thinking, then when other people interact with you, regardless of the nature of what they're saying, you don't take it personal. You take it as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the other individual that is, interacting with you that way, to understand a different perspective, and also accept the fact that you can be wrong. You can be wrong about yourself. You can be wrong about the world. You may not have the answers necessary to understand what you need to understand. You may think you have the answers, but you don't. Your experience may not be enough for you to even have the skills needed to understand at the moment. Be flexible with the space in your mind and within yourself to understand that maybe you sometimes, like a scientist, has to change, their hypothesis, or sometimes theories have to be adjusted. Understand that sometimes our own theories and our own things within ourselves that we put down as law for our life, they have to change. They have to evolve. You have to allow for that to exist. Why? Because that's at the core of the route of taking things less personal a little bit every day, until eventually you get to a point where you don't even find yourself being defensive or trying to defend yourself in an argument. Why are you defending yourself in an argument with people or with whoever doesn't seem to want to agree with you? And think of this also. Would you go to that individual for advice for life, or advice on what to wear, or advice on how to, manage a certain problem? If you are constantly finding yourself taking things personal from individuals that you wouldn't even go to for advice, then why is it that you are taking things personal to begin with? It is a waste of your mental energy. Cognitively, we worry about what other people think because we were designed as a species to live in a community, to live in groups. Because since our ancestors, and I'm talking about caveman, I'm talking about Homo sapiens time, they relied on one another for survival. So being able to count on other people around you in that group had value to you. What they thought had value to you. But nowadays, culture and society has turned that thinking of what other people think about me into, like, almost like you have to be constantly showing off to one another. And if you're not at that same level, or you're not at that same capacity, you are less than, or you're not as important. And that starts to create a lot of grief within people, and resentment with their own life. And before you know it, you have an individual that is projecting their limitation, their feeling of limitation in their life towards others in relationships. And people start to take things personal because, you know, water can only hit the rock so much until the rock turns into sand. I get it. Your heart can only be hurt so much until you actually have to do something or say something. I understand that too. But what I'm telling you, or what I'm advising you to do en route to let's take things less personal, as a way of basically having a more mentally healthy and peaceful life, um, it's a choice. It's still a choice. You are still choosing to take it personal or not. You are still choosing what you put on your tray and what you don't. It may seem like you're not, because it's like, I didn't pick this fight. I didn't pick this argument. Yeah, there's a lot of things in life we don't pick, but the things in life sometimes pick you. And who knows what the reason is why you're picked. But it's your choice nonetheless, in the moment that you've noticed you've been picked, to either go in it with a smile, with a great attitude, or go in it and be constantly defensive as if you're fighting a boxing match that never ends. It becomes exhausting when you have to always be proving yourself, explaining yourself, justifying yourself, defending yourself. Usually people who have to defend themselves so much, I mean, just think of the court system, they have to defend themselves so much because usually there's a lie in the midst, because if the case is pretty simple and the evidence is pretty evident, then a solution is pretty obvious, right? But when you can't get an obvious solution and you need a drawn out process, probably there's lies in the midst, one or more. So whoever is lying the most ends up having to defend the most and be the most defensive. Same comes with how we deal with life. If you find yourself being defensive constantly, or that's just a mode that you jump into, first of all, it's immature, because it's something that children do, or mostly teenagers do, because they always want to be proven right, and they always want to be at the top. And they want their word to be the best word, right? So it's an immature stance to take as an adult. And even if you're a teen, it's an immature stance to take, because it's just showing that you are not allowing yourself to evolve. In order to evolve, you have to accept new ideas. You have to accept new patterns of behavior. You have to allow new mindsets to develop within you. And those mindsets shouldn't be mindsets that are programmed from social conditioning and ideologies that literally only exist to kill your faith. They literally exist to actually annihilate the possibility of you not taking things personal. You know, they're most of these systems we have in our culture today are designed precisely for people to take things personal. The racial movement, the BLM movement, the a bunch of other movements. I'm not even going to name them because if you just look them up, if you Google them or if you YouTube them, you're going to find them. And if you're watching this video, you probably know what they are, whether you live in the West or in the East. But they're all ideologies and systematic ideas that are being pushed forward. And if you look at the core of them, they're all meant to keep you at a victim mindset program, which will keep you in a defensive mode, which will turn you into a person that takes little to nothing personally all the time. Then you can't have relationships. Then you also don't know how to live in peace because everything offends you. And when you're an individual that gets offended very easily, it's very hard for you to find a peaceful living. And you want to know what living in peace is like? Well, I would definitely invite every individual to at least read one of the religious books in the world. Whether it's the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, just read it so you could see the people or the characters that are in those religious books and those religious writings, the ones that live the most peaceful, why they live the most peaceful. There's several accounts of individuals that have gone through tumultuous and traumatic experience, but in the midst of the traumatic experience, they found peace. We can't disinvite insults and disrespect for the simple reason that it's during those moments that we realize the value of humility. We realize the value of compassion and of grace. You're not going to know how to be compassionate if you've never suffered an offense. Sometimes suffering offenses is not so much because, you know, you need to be put down or put in your place or you deserve to be offended. That's not what I'm trying to say. But sometimes an offense is needed in order to correct your spirit and make you wake up that, hey, listen, maybe you haven't been as humble as you thought. Maybe you haven't been as nice as you thought. Maybe you take things too personal and you're constantly in a victim mindset. Maybe it's time to change that. Especially if you're tired and exhausted of always being defensive, always like having to stand up for a cause, for a belief. It could be very exhausting, you know. Many of the people that I have coached, one of their biggest qualms was the inability to just be flexible with, how they took things from other people, how they received communication from other individuals. We need to be mindful of that. And we need to also be mindful that we have the power to choose to stop it. Now I know this doesn't sound easy, um, because none of these things that I'm suggesting to do in these coaching episodes is something you could do in one sitting and it's done. You have to practice this every day. And every day you almost remind yourself a little bit about it, just like, going to the gym or doing some form of exercise or training for whatever. You don't just train for a soccer game once and that's it. You play amazing all the time. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo has won 777 games in his career. And I don't think he won those games by just practicing once a week, you know? So the same goes for our brain. Our brain needs to have a constant reset every day, where you're reminding yourself of these principles. And why is that? Why would I want to do that? Well, because living in peace is more valuable to you than living in chaos. It's your choice. If you want to live in chaos, then keep going the way you're going. Just keep going at that. But if you want to live in peace, you want to live a more abundant life when it comes to compassion and peace, which is a very joyful place to be, then these steps have to be taken, and no one is going to do them for you. You know, Neuroscientists have, I think I've mentioned this before, have shown through many studies that meditation is key to balancing your emotions and your logic, to maintaining a serene state of being. And they identified a serene state of being as a peaceful state of being. So If people in the science realm that are not necessarily the biggest spiritualists of the world have concluded this through decades of study, research, and also application on patients, then why are we still rejecting the idea that attention to the mind needs to be had and needs to be practiced? You can buy as many books as you want. You can research and get as much information as possible about how to, surround yourself with materials, crystals, bracelets, whatever, to change your vibration. None of that is going to be valuable if you in your mind don't change your pattern of thinking. So to take things less personal, let's start with like an initial exercise, just as an example as to how we're so quick to being defensive. Write down all of the thoughts you have in your mind about yourself. Just write them down. You don't have to write them down right now, but write them down after you see this clip. Write them down, whatever they are, positive, negative, whatever they are, whichever ones exist. I do this exercise as a beginner with a lot of my clients. And then what I want you to do, you're going to read through them. You're going to cross out the ones that you know for a fact are not you. Like, for a fact they're not you. Why do you have to do this? Why not just think it? Because what's in your mind is kind of scattered. And once you put it on paper, you organize it. Once you organize it, you can analyze it. Your brain can actually analyze this information. But in your mind, your brain can't analyze it. And here's why. A lot of those thoughts that you have don't even stem from you. They're not 100% you. They are basically patterns of cognition that happen in your brain as a result of the interactions you have over extended periods of time with different people. So you may actually have thoughts and feelings about yourself that are not even accurate based on the interactions you've had over time in your life. I know this from experience and I know this from application. So you're going to X out the ones that are not you. And then I want you to circle the ones that are. And then what I want you to notice is how many of them that are not you versus how many of them you accept are you. Notice the number. It's very hard for us to have a greater number of positive thoughts of ourselves compared to negative. We usually have more negative thoughts, right? And this is the reason why. It takes about 17 positive statements or affirmations or 17 pieces of positivity to cancel out one negative piece. So don't be fooled that just because you have let's say 10 negative items on your list and only 3 positive. Don't be fooled because a lot of people look at that and be like, "But I have 10. Some of those must be the truth then." No. It takes one positive to no, it takes 17 positive. I'm sorry, 17 positives. Statements, thoughts or affirmations, any version of those, 17 positive ones to cancel one negative out. That means that if you have three positive statements on your paper and 10 negative, that's pretty good because that means that you probably have had a lot of other positive ones that have been used to cancel out a lot of other negative ones. It's just that the balance is always off because the negative ones tend to weigh so much. Why? Because our ego makes us believe that the negative is the truth. Because your own ego will use the negative thoughts in your mind to control you so that it can be in charge. But nevertheless, the ego is also part of you. It's also the side that you can control, how you can tame it. Watch my previous video so you can know how to do the taming of the ego a little bit better. So you take things less personal when you make this list because then you realize if I have this much negative within me about my own self, then let me be compassionate with myself. I'm not going to believe these. The next time that you hear anything similar to what was on that paper negative about you, you don't believe in it because it doesn't matter who it comes from. You're not going to believe in it. If you're not accepting it to exist in your own mind, you shouldn't accept it to exist in your mind coming from someone else. They're external, they're outside. They don't know you fully. They don't know your mind fully. Even if they're super close to you, even if they're your spouse, they don't know you fully. And a lot of that negativity, again, comes as a projection from their lack, from what is missing from their part within themselves, Or sometimes individuals' negativity actually stems from their inability to handle their own negative thoughts within themselves. So they have to spill them out. And sometimes they spill them out onto you because you're the closest person. So understanding this, knowing this, knowledge of this helps us to start to take things less personal. Another way to help you start to take things less personal, if you could envision this, envision losing everything. Like envision everything that you have now in your life is gone. And for some of you, it may feel like, oh yeah, I'll be free. But quite honestly, for a lot of you, there's things that you would do anything now to have back if you were to lose it all. If you envision losing it all, what would you do to get it back? Everything, right? So then even the arguments, even the disagreements, even the petty words, you would want them back. You know why? Because the idea of just losing everything, of losing it all, would just break your heart. So what's the point of taking something personal that if it wasn't there, you probably wouldn't want it to be totally non-existent? It would break your heart if that didn't have, if they weren't there, if that presence wasn't there. So again, obviously this takes you prioritizing and determining the value of people in your life, but be open to being flexible, to not taking things personal. Don't believe that it's aimed towards you. They're aiming towards a different target. You're just in the crossfire. Remember that next time. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I'm going to give you some more tips in my next clip, but I wanted to record this because I definitely felt inspired. So I hope you apply this technique. If you haven't made the list before, do it now. I promise you, you're going to see a positive result as an outcome after doing this. And if you have to write the list many times, write it many times. It's definitely something that I do once in a while, just to recalibrate my mindset. I have my clients do often throughout the months of having sessions with me, but then even after, do it as an exercise of your own meditative time. And trust me, you're going to start to live a life of more peace, of more joy, more contentment, more compassion. Why? Because you understand that if it takes 17 positive affirmations to cancel one negative, then of course the negatives are always going to want to take over. And they're always going to be so present, but it's up to you to choose to cancel them out as much as you can. I love you so much for watching. Check the show more section if you want to contribute to the growth of my movement, or, write me a message if you want to be on my podcast. I'd love to have a sit down and get your perspective on life. That would be great, because that's all what the Love Tribe podcast is about. I love you so much, and let's continue to have a great life with more peace, joy, and contentment together.